Hi, my name doesn't matter as much as what was done to me. 15 years ago, my father knocked on my door with a 5-year-old boy and no warning. Just for a little while, he said. Then he vanished. I raised that child like he was mine, worked 3 jobs, gave up everything, never once complained. And then, my father came back, not to thank me, not even to explain. He came back with the police and said I kidnapped him. How do you prepare for a betrayal that deep? You don't. You survive it. But not in the way you think. You might want to sit down for this. That evening started like any other. I was standing at the kitchen sink, rinsing a plate I'd already cleaned once, just to give my hand something to do. The TV murmured from the other room. Outside, the streetlight flickered the way it always did when the weather began to cool. Early fall had a habit of sneaking up on this neighborhood. Then someone knocked. Not loud, not urgent, just firm enough to mean it wasn't a neighbor asking for sugar. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door, already annoyed at the interruption. When I opened it, my brother stood there. He looked thinner than I remembered. Tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. His eyes kept moving, never settling on mine for more than a second. Beside him stood a small boy. The kid couldn't have been more than 5. He wore a hooded sweatshirt that was too light for the evening air and held a small backpack with both hands, like it might disappear if he let go. He didn't look scared, just alert, watching. "This is temporary," my brother said. He spoke fast, as if slowing down might trap him. "Just a few days. I'll be back before you know it." I asked questions. Where he was going. Why now? What was wrong? None of the answers lined up. Work trouble. Personal stuff. Nothing that explained the bag or why he wouldn't step inside. The boy looked at me, not at him. That should have told me everything. My brother crouched, said something quick to the kid, then stood up again. He avoided my eyes as he pressed the backpack into my hands. The zipper was half broken. One strap had been stitched back together with thread that didn't match. "I'll call," he said. Then he turned around, walked to his car, and drove off. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have, the porch light buzzing over my head. The street was quiet again, like nothing had happened. Inside, the kid sat on the edge of my couch. He kept his shoes on. I offered him water. He nodded. I handed him a glass and watched him drink carefully, like he'd learned not to spill at someone else's place. I called my brother, straight to voicemail. I told myself it was fine. Phones die. People get busy. This wasn't the first time he'd disappeared for a bit. An hour passed, then another. The boy curled up on the couch and fell asleep without being told. His head rested against the armrest, backpack still hooked around one wrist. I covered him with a throw blanket and turned off the TV. Morning came quietly. Pale light through the blinds. Coffee brewing out of habit. No missed calls. No messages. That was when it settled in. Slow and heavy. This wasn't a delay. It was a handoff. I went to work late, spent my break on the phone, pricing daycares I couldn't afford, and asking favors I didn't want to ask. Numbers didn't bend just because a kid needed them to. Childcare alone cost more than my rent. I did the math anyway. Bills, hours, space I didn't have. By the end of the week, I'd taken extra shifts wherever I could find them. Nights bled into mornings. Sleep became something I borrowed instead of owned. I learned how long I could function on coffee and quiet determination. On my way home one evening, I stopped at the grocery store and bought food meant for 2. Cereal with cartoons on the box, Milk I didn't drink myself. I moved my alarm clock earlier without thinking too much about it. I didn't explain the situation to anyone in full. It was easier to say it was short term. Easier to believe it too. I didn't call myself brave. I didn't call myself anything at all. I stayed. That night, as I tucked him into the spare bed, he looked up at me and asked a question so simple it caught me off guard. "Is my dad coming back?" I paused. Then I told him yes. I didn't know yet how wrong I was. He nodded slowly and turned to face the wall, pulling the blanket up to his chin. I waited until his breathing settled, then stepped out and shut the door halfway. I stood in the hallway, hand still on the doorknob, staring at nothing. That night, I didn't sleep much. It wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was the weight of something unnamed pressing itself into the corners of my life. I didn't recognize it yet, but I felt it settling in. The days began stacking up. Morning started earlier. I got used to the sound of the small footsteps behind me while I made toast. I memorized the cartoons he liked, the ones he didn't, and which shoes gave him blisters if he wore them too long. At school drop-off, no one asked questions. The front desk assumed I was his father. I never corrected them. It felt easier that way, like keeping a secret neither of us wanted to say out loud. The teachers wrote my name on every form. I signed every one. At the grocery store, the cashier smiled and handed him a sticker. "You helping Dad today?" she asked once. He nodded. I didn't say a word. We found a rhythm, not because it was perfect, but because there was no other option. Bills still came. Work still demanded. But I learned how to adjust. I stopped thinking in terms of my time and started blocking out hours for lunch packing, school events, and midnight fevers. He asked about his dad less and less. At first, I told myself that was just time doing what it does, softening what used to sting. But late at night, I'd hear him whisper questions to himself when he thought I was asleep. I never interrupted. I just listened from down the hall, letting him keep whatever space he needed. There were no big moments, no turning points you could circle on a calendar, just small things. Grocery lists taped to the fridge, missing socks found in the couch cushions, that cheap night light that needed 2 taps to turn on. I must have fixed it 3 times, but he still did the tapping, 2 soft hits every night like clockwork. I think he liked the ritual. Then came the scraped knee. It was a Saturday. We were at the park. He ran too fast and tripped over the edge of the walkway. Nothing serious. A little blood. Some dirt. He didn't cry right away. Just sat there, blinking hard. I crouched beside him, pulled a napkin from my pocket, and started brushing the gravel from his palm. That's when he said it. "Dad." Just one word. Just that. Then silence. His eyes got wide, like he'd broken a rule he didn't know was there, like he expected me to be mad. I didn't flinch. I didn't say anything for a second. Just finished cleaning the scrape. "You're okay," I said quietly, pressing the napkin a little firmer so he wouldn't see my hand shake. We didn't talk about it after that, but it changed something in the air. A thread had been tied between us, and neither of us was trying to untie it. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not friends, not coworkers, not even my sister when she called on holidays to check in. It felt like something too fragile to explain. Like if I tried to define it, I'd lose it. I still told myself, maybe one day, his dad would show up again. Maybe with a plan this time. Maybe with an apology. But I stopped checking my phone for messages. I stopped saving receipts for things I thought I might be reimbursed for. I stopped thinking of this as temporary. Instead, I bought him a new backpack when his old one tore. I signed him up for soccer, even though I had to move my shift around to make the practices work. I memorized his favorite sandwich, the one with no crust, and that ridiculous amount of mustard. I still never called myself Dad, but when I thought about the future, I pictured him in it. Not because I was trying to take someone else's place, but because no one else had shown up to claim it. Years passed. The house stopped feeling borrowed. It grew into us. I repainted his room, fixed the leaky faucet, bought a better nightlight. Then one evening, as I stood by the window folding laundry, a white envelope slid through the front door. No name. Just my address in heavy block letters. Inside was a letter. No return address, no signature, just one line. I'm coming to get my son. 15 years of silence ended with a knock I never saw coming. I stood there with that envelope still folded in my hand long after I'd read the line inside. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice when something inside you starts to hum too loudly. I didn't tell him about the letter. Not that evening, not the next morning either. I told myself it was nothing more than a threat written by someone who'd already proven he didn't follow through. 15 years of silence had trained me to believe in absence. By early afternoon, life had slipped back into its usual shape. I was rinsing a coffee mug at the sink, listening to the low hum of the dryer in the laundry room. He was at the table, finishing homework, tapping his pencil against the page the way he always did when he was stuck. Then came the knock. Not hurried, not aggressive. 3 firm raps, evenly spaced. The kind you don't ignore, because they sound official, like someone expects you to answer. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door, already running through a short list of possibilities. Package delivery, utility company, maybe a neighbor. When I opened it, the porch filled with uniforms. 2 police officers stood in front of me. Calm faces, neutral posture. Behind them, a few steps back, was a man I hadn't seen in a decade and a half. I recognized him immediately. He looked healthier than I remembered, better dressed. His hair was cut neat. His shoulders were squared like he'd practiced standing that way. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl either. He looked prepared. My stomach dropped, slow and heavy. One of the officers spoke first. "Sir, are you the resident here?" I nodded, my voice catching just enough to betray me. Yes. They asked for the boy by name. The full name. First and last. I answered without hesitation, still believing that clarity mattered. "How long has he been living with you?" I told them the truth. I always had. 15 years, since he was 5, no interruptions, no shared weekends, just me. The word came next, spoken without drama. Kidnapping. It landed wrong, like it didn't belong in the room. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I kept my voice steady. That's not what happened. The officer nodded slowly, like he'd heard that sentence many times before. We understand you may see it that way. The man behind them didn't look at me. He stared past my shoulder, toward the hallway, like he was checking inventory, like he was reclaiming property. They stepped inside. I didn't invite them. I didn't stop them either. They explained my position in simple terms. No legal guardianship. No custody filings. No adoption paperwork. Nothing that would give my year's weight in a court record. Temporary housing, one of them said. That phrase erased a lifetime. I was told to step aside while they spoke to him. Not asked. Told. I moved because arguing would only make things worse. I could feel it in the way the room had shifted. He stood there in the doorway of his room, confused, trying to read the situation like a problem he hadn't studied for. His eyes moved from the officers to the man behind them, then back to me. I wanted to explain everything at once. I wanted to tell them about fevers and school meetings and scraped knees, about grocery lists and nightlights and quiet promises never spoken out loud. Instead, I said nothing. Silence became strategy. I watched as the man finally stepped forward, clearing his throat like this was a business meeting. "I'm his father," he said, calm and practiced. "I've come to take him home." Home? The word scraped something raw. One of the officers glanced at me. Not unkindly, not apologetically either, just professionally detached. "Sir, we're going to need you to gather any documentation you have. You'll have a chance to speak with legal counsel." A chance? Not a guarantee. They made a decision without me. A timeline. A plan. The front door stayed open, letting in the sound of a cruiser idling at the curb. I stood there, hands empty, watching the shape of my life tilt in real time. They told me I had 5 minutes before my life changed forever. The air in the house didn't move. The cruiser's engine hummed faintly outside like a countdown ticking in reverse. No yelling, no chaos, just stillness, so thick it pressed down on everything. 5 minutes, one of the officers repeated, checking his watch. I nodded because I knew if I opened my mouth, nothing good would come out. I felt my jaw lock the way it did back in high school when my coach told me to take a hit and not hit back. Same lesson, different arena. I turned toward the hallway. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He was still in his room, halfway through packing a science project for school the next day. A shoebox diorama of the solar system. He'd used foil for the rings on Saturn. He looked up when I walked in, eyes searching mine. Did I mess up? That hit harder than I expected. "No, buddy," I said softly. "Not even a little." I sat on the edge of his bed and ran a hand over my face. I need you to pack a few things. Clothes, your toothbrush, just in case." He paused, confusion clouding his expression. "Just in case of what?" I forced a smile I didn't feel. "We'll talk soon, promise. Just do it for me, okay?" He didn't argue, just moved slowly. Unsure, like maybe this was a drill from a handbook he didn't remember reading. I folded a sweatshirt and tried not to let my hands shake. Out in the hallway, I could hear voices, low and steady, the kind used when building a narrative, not telling the truth. I stepped out and stood just around the corner. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I didn't have the energy to pretend I wasn't. "I was patient," his father said. "I didn't want to escalate anything. I didn't even know where he was for years." That wasn't true. He knew exactly where we lived. I'd sent updates the first few months, even photos. No response. Eventually, I stopped. Silence wasn't accidental. It was tactical. "I just want what's right," he continued. "What's best for him." He made it sound reasonable, even generous, like he was fixing a mistake the world had made, not one he'd created. Then came the twist. Papers. He handed them to the officers, school records with his name added, doctor's visits he must have scheduled in the last month, maybe even a notarized statement claiming intention to reunite. Nothing solid enough to prove custody, but enough to raise questions. And in rooms like this, doubt is a weapon. I walked back to the living room. My chest felt tight. I sat down on the armrest of the couch because sitting fully felt too much like surrender. That's when the voice came, Small, internal, cowardly. Just sign something. End it cleanly. Spare him the noise, the press, the confusion. I looked toward the kitchen counter where a pen rested next to yesterday's unopened mail. I reached for it. If I signed something, anything, it might mean he'd be safe. Less fallout, less courtrooms, less pain. My hand hovered. Then I heard footsteps. He was back in the hallway, standing straight, backpack slung over one shoulder. In his hand, something familiar. A nightlight. Small, round, cheap. The kind that only worked if you tapped it just right. He held it out. "It still works," he said, barely above a whisper. No begging. No questions. No dramatic speech. Just a fact. But the weight of it hit harder than anything his father said. That little plastic light had seen fevers and nightmares, whispered conversations in the dark, and quiet reassurances whispered when the world felt too big. He hadn't outgrown it. He'd kept it tucked away, even when he thought I didn't notice. I stared at it, then at him. Something settled inside me. Not anger, not pride, just clarity. I put the pen down. "I'd like a lawyer," I said out loud calmly. The room shifted, not visibly, but in how people stood, like they'd just been reminded I wasn't folding. The officer closest to me nodded slowly. "That's your right." I didn't say anything else. No more defending, no more explaining. I started paying attention. Who said what? What they wrote down. What they didn't. His father watched me, that same smirk from years ago resurfacing. He thought I was buying time, that I'd already lost. He was wrong. The cruiser door opened with a hollow thud. I watched him walk toward it, small steps on the pavement, clutching the nightlight in one hand and the strap of his backpack in the other. I didn't know if this was goodbye or just an ugly chapter before the fight began, but I knew one thing. I didn't fight back that night. I prepared. I didn't sleep much after that night. There was too much waiting to do. And waiting, it turns out, isn't idle. It's paperwork. It's phone calls. It's gathering school records, insurance forms, tax returns, birthday cards with your handwriting. It's reliving 15 years of memories through receipts and signatures and timestamps. It's building a case for something you never thought you'd have to defend. Love. Weeks passed like water through a clogged drain, slow, uncertain, occasionally loud. But eventually, the date came. I dressed early, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Jonah was already up. He didn't ask questions. He just poured cereal, sat across from me, and ate in silence. When it was time to leave, he handed me the same nightlight again. Didn't say a word, just placed it in my hand and looked at me the way only someone who knows your smallest habits can. The family court building wasn't unfamiliar. I'd been there once for a traffic ticket. This time, it felt colder, brighter, more sterile. The waiting area had hard chairs and harder eyes. Most people kept their heads down. Some whispered. Others looked like they'd already lost before stepping inside. I sat alone. That part didn't bother me anymore. Loneliness, once you've accepted it, can be surprisingly quiet. The father arrived 10 minutes late, in a suit he hadn't earned and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He shook hands like a politician, palms dry, grip practiced. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. His lawyer went first. Clean words, polished phrases. Regret. Reconnection. Biological rights. He painted a picture of confusion, of a man overwhelmed by circumstance, doing the right thing now, even if he hadn't before. What he didn't say filled the room louder than what he did. No mention of the silence. No explanation for 15 years of absence. Just a focus on timing, on redemption, on how he was ready. He framed his return as bravery. He framed my presence as interference. I didn't flinch. I just listened. Then my lawyer stood. He didn't offer emotion. No appeals to heartstrings. Just facts. 15 years of medical appointments, all signed by me. Report cards, PTA meeting logs, emergency room discharges, photographs, emails, receipts. He handed them over in a single manila folder, thick, worn, labeled in blue ink with just one word, Jonah. And the room shifted. Facts don't perform. They persist. The judge flipped through the paperwork slowly, her brow furrowed. She asked only one question. Who has attended every school conference since kindergarten? There was no hesitation in my lawyer's answer. My client. That was the moment it all started to tilt. Then came the part I hadn't planned for. Does the child wish to speak? The judge asked. The room went still. No one looked at me. Not even Jonah. And I didn't move. I didn't nod. I didn't try to guide him. Because this wasn't mine to influence. He stood slowly. Wore a button-up I'd ironed the night before. Shoes I'd reminded him to clean. He walked to the front with the kind of nervous energy that sits just behind your teeth. I don't want to pick sides, he started, voice small, honest. But I know who packed my lunches. He paused, looked down, then up again. I know who picked me up from practice when it rained, who stayed up when I had the flu, who never missed one stupid school play, even when they were bad. There was no bitterness in his voice, no anger, just memory. He finished with a shrug. I know who stayed. That was it. He sat back down, eyes forward. He didn't look at me, but his hand brushed mine for half a second. Enough. The ruling didn't take long. The judge didn't deliver a speech. No grand declaration, just a clear decision. Guardianship granted, custody formalized, permanency affirmed. The father gathered his papers quietly, left without a word, without a glance. I didn't watch him go. When we stepped out into the hallway, the sunlight looked different, not brighter, just more real. Jonah reached into his pocket and handed me something folded. I opened it, then smiled when I saw the torn piece of notepad paper, the one I used to tuck into his lunchbox years ago. The handwriting was mine, but the message had been rewritten. You're doing great. I see you. Keep going. I didn't need to read it twice. I didn't need to keep it. That night, we had pasta. He grated the cheese. I washed the dishes. The house was quiet again. Before bed, he tapped the nightlight once. It flickered, then glowed. I stood in the doorway, watching the light stretch across the room. I never kidnapped a child. I raised one.